You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Hi everybody and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and reader of books. Yes, my voice is dodgy again. We're just gonna power through it. It's fine. We'll get over it together. As long as it's not too distracting for you, I'm fairly certain I'll survive. So, I don't know what I'm doing wrong with the new system that I'm uploading my podcast to, but I keep scheduling it for like certain dates, and then it's not publishing on those certain dates. And I, being the absolute sausage that I am, didn't go check. Like, what is that about? Mate, I didn't think to look at whether it had come up or not. No, I just assumed that I had scheduled it correctly. Clearly, I have not. So, I have scheduled this episode, but then I will check. So if this isn't out first thing on Tuesday, then I'm going to have to manually set all the episodes. It's fine. I'll make it work because it's who I am. Very confident in myself, aren't I? Absolutely 100%. I have had such a lazy Sunday. Like, I spent yesterday going up and down the loft or the attic, depending on your region, getting clothes sorted and putting stuff away. So mainly my mum's and my kids' stuff. Like, I haven't even touched mine this year. So all my stuff is split into, as some of you know, autumn, winter and spring, summer. So I do that with the kids too. So anything that they're still going to fit into, like in the springtime, or anything that I've bought in advance for springtime is getting put up. Their winter stuff that all came down, stuff that I, purchased last year that turned out to be a bit too big, things like that. And they're all down and it's all getting ready. I have these like onesies for them that are like monsters because I got them big. So they've got those to wear, especially as we're probably not going to be able to heat the house the same way this year, I think. Fluffy pajamas for everybody is just, I think, how we're going to have to do it, really. So we're getting stuff sorted and I did that. And then today I was like, I'm not feeling great. So I ended up chilling out with my mum all day. And we watched several hours of Agatha Christie. There was like a murder mystery like day happening on one of the channels. And it was like, yes, we're watching black and white Margaret Rutherford in Murder, She Said. We had Glenn Close in Crooked House. And then, of course, some classic Poirot. Can't turn down some classic Poirot. No Tommy and Tuppence, I'm afraid. What I do miss, though, is there used to be this show. I used to be able to watch it, but I literally haven't seen it in for yonks. It was a French version, I believe, of Partners in Crime. I think it was like the Petit Meurtre or something like that. It was a detective and then another fella and then a journalist was involved. Although I think there might be a Portuguese version of it now. I love that. I love that retro vintage sort of murder mystery, Agatha Christie sort of vibe. Like, that is very much a flavour I enjoy. I bloody love a wee whodunit. Absolutely. I actually want to rebuild my Agatha Christie collection. Book collection, that is. I used to have like a decent wee selection of the books and they got damaged in storage, which is just unfortunate, but sometimes these things happen. So I'm just hoping to slowly just rebuild it. Especially when you have these fantastic artists creating these gorgeous covers. Like you've got some that are that I want to call the fabric art house, like Penguin Random House does. And then of course you've got sort of the Art Deco style that people are recreating. And you've just got these really gorgeous covers. And don't judge a book by its cover. No, motherfucker, people get paid good money for you to judge that book by its cover. So yes, I'd love to do that. Oh, and before I go any further, I should mention that a little birdie told me that over in Canada, someone handed in a school history report with me listed as the source. So, if this was you, if you are that person, hi, you're awesome. You're currently my favourite Canadian. And keep up the good work. You're brilliant, alright? You are. Now I know what all of you are thinking. You're thinking, quit your jibber jabber and fact me. In fact you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. Our sources are America's Queen, The Life of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis by Sarah Bradford. What Jackie Taught Us, Lessons from the Remarkable Life of Jacqueline by Tina Flaherty. One Nation Under Sex, How the Private Lives of Presidents, First Ladies and Their Lovers Changed the Course of American History by Isaac David and Larry Flint. Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis by Barbara Leeming. The Time of Their Lives by Al Silverman. Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, A Life by Donald Spoto. Grace and Power by Sally Bedell Smith. And of course, articles from History.com, Biography.com and Vanity Fair. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. Jacqueline Lee Bouvier was born on the 28th of July 1929 in Southampton, New York, to Wall Street stockbroker John Verneau Bouvier III, also known as Black Jack, and socialite Janet Norton Lee. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking she was very French, of French descent, but only she's like 1/8 French. She's got the surname, and her name is always pronounced Jacqueline, like that's how she pronounced it. But her family's actually more like Irish. Like her dad's have like a wee bit of Scots and a wee bit of Irish, a wee bit of French, and her mum is just like well French, because her mum was very much of Irish heritage, like 100%. It was all sort of Irish Americans marrying Irish Americans, because her family had fled Ireland during Angorta Moor, the famine, and they had relocated to the States. Now, one thing that Janet definitely instilled in both of her daughters was to marry well and to marry up. Lowering their standards or moving down the social ladder just wasn't on the cards. Not for these girls. So yeah, Jackie is born in 1929. Later that summer, Jacqueline is baptised at the St. Ignatius Loyola Catholic Church in Manhattan. Being of Irish descent and of French descent, girl is very Catholic. And then 4 years later, her sister Caroline is born. The Petit Bouviers would spend most of their year in the 12-room duplex apartment in Park Avenue, Manhattan. And of course, they summered in the Hamptons at a family estate. Jackie is absolutely the apple of her father's eye. I mean, first of all, she's named after him. There's a reason she's called Jacqueline. Jacqueline. And he favours her over Caroline. He does. He loves both his girls, but he prefers Jackie. He even goes as far as to say that she is the most beautiful daughter a man could ever have. Sir, you have 2 daughters. That is a dick move. But Jackie's also really close to like her father's side of the family. She's really close to her dad and her granddad. Like they're all very close, and they really shaped her into like who she was going to become. They kind of gave her this sort of independent spirit, and probably the stubbornness too. One thing that Jack really sort of imprints on his daughters is to not only do their best, but to be the best. And they really lean into this, especially Jackie. So she ends up competing in like equestrian riding, sporty stuff. And she's winning medals and trophies. She's got taking ballet lessons. And she is learning languages. She's got languages coming up the wazoo. She's learning like Italian, Spanish, and of course, French. When she's 6 years old, Jackie enrolls in the Chapin School in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And this is going to be surprising for some of you, but she's a wee bit of an arse there. So she's misbehaving and she's getting kicked out of classes, the whole shebang. You know, and the head teacher's like, she's got all these great qualities and she's got all this good stuff, but it's not going to matter if you keep being a wee arse. I mean, she probably said it in a more eloquent fashion, but yeah. Now, things weren't all peaches and cream. Their parents' marriage and relationship was strained, to say the least. You see, when they were young, their father, Jack no, that is a very different person, Black Jack Bouvier. He had an uncanny resemblance to Clark Gable, one of the heartthrob movie stars of the era. So much so that people would actually stop him and ask him for his autographs because they were convinced he was Clark Gable. But everything wasn't exactly coming up Millhouse for Black Jack because he had lost a lot of money from the Wall Street crash of 29, so the same year Jacqueline was born. Lost a ton of money, and since then he had been consistently not doing well. Which, if he had, been doing okay, if he still had the money and he still had the prestige and everything that went with it, I don't think the marriage would have been as strained. See, Black Jack Bouvier was a whore. We could call him a womanizer, we could put some fancy terms all around it. Man was a hoe. So he was tickling his todger up and down Manhattan, and that could have been acceptable, that could have been, fine and dealt with, because society back then, men did what they wanted and women just had to grin and bear it quite a lot of the time. Good thing that it has changed and is not, we're not stuck in a horrific patriarchal hellscape where actions, thoughts and ways of being are being policed by men. Anywho, Black Jack was also drinking and drinking heavily, so between sleeping around, drowning his sorrows, and having no money, there was a line. And for Janet, Jack Bouvier had crossed it, and probably more than once. So they split when Jackie is 7 years old, but they don't get divorced for another 4 years. It probably just took that long to get it done, because, Catholic. And I actually think this is one of the reasons why Jackie was misbehaving in school, because she loved her father, she loved her dad, she loved being with her dad, and the split, the separation, and then the divorce, that's really hard on her. So they had split in 1936, and then they had tried to reconcile in 1937, but that didn't work out, and then they eventually divorced in 1940. The very next year, the US joins World War II, which obviously is not a super fun time for anybody. Though somehow through all of this, in the early 40s, Jackie's mum manages to meet Huey D. Auchincloss, an American millionaire and heir to Stafford Oil. I think he's also got investments and a bunch of other stuff. He is well rich, by the way. Janet did as Janet does, which is marry smartly. At least this time. So, although her previous husband's money had dwindled away over the years by bad investments and crashes and everything else that happened, her new husband, he was doing very, very well for himself. Did I call it Stafford Oil earlier? Standard Oil. Honestly, I worry about myself sometimes. In 1942, the pair get married, and Jackie and her sister gain 3 or 4 step-siblings. There's a whole chunk of them. And eventually they actually end up with 2 more half-siblings, Janet and James Auchincloss, I believe. So Jackie and her sister don't actually attend their mum's wedding, just because of like World War II and the way everything is restricted, and because the wedding was actually put together pretty sharpish. Like, it was a very quick wedding, and it wasn't a shotgun wedding, or it wasn't to my knowledge, because their half-sibling wasn't born until like 1945, so that's 3 years. So unless something happened in the meantime, who's to say? So they actually get on really well with the Auchinclosses, and they refer to their new stepdad as Uncle Hudie, which is what I'm going to call him for the rest of this, because I'm having such trouble pronouncing Auchincloss, and I think I'm still pronouncing it wrong. Even though I looked it up, I still feel like I've made a mistake somewhere. And Uncle Hudie is somehow, for someone that rich and esteemed, is really unassuming, to the point that Gore Vidal actually calls him a magnum of chloroform, because he finds him so unbelievably boring and dull. Like, cool. But Jackie and her sister, they actually really like their stepdad. So after the marriage, Janet moves the girls out to Marywood, which is Uncle Hudie's fucking gorgeous house. It's absolutely stunning. It's a gorgeous Georgian house with terraced gardens overlooking a river in Northern Virginia. And that's like their mainstay. But of course they summer. And where do they spend their holidays? But Newport, Rhode Island, at Hammersmith Farm, a 50-acre wooded estate. Because of course it is. They're like incredibly, incredibly rich. So like they arrive in these like gorgeous fucking places, which were even better than like the places they went with their dad when they were younger. And it was like stepping into a fairy tale for them, because they were just so pretty. A complete juxtaposition of that is their dad's modern abode. So Black Jack Bouvier, he moves into this dingy wee apartment on like East 74th Street. Do you like how I said that as if I had any idea where East 74th Street was? I have no fucking clue. I could look at a map and it probably still wouldn't make sense to me. So whenever they visit their dad, they're visiting him in this cramped wee apartment, right? This wee flat. And it is a stark contrast to what they're living in with their mum. And they're eating dinner off this wee card table. You know, like a table on which you play cards. Because the dining room doesn't exist anymore, because he had converted it into a bedroom for his 2 daughters. Which, honestly, is really sweet. It's very good that he did that instead of just making them top and tail it on the couch. You know what I mean? And for them, it makes them really fucking aware of what a lack of money can do. So they're looking at their dad's situation and his financial situation and what it has led to. And it really ingrains in them that they do not want to be like this. Like, they want financial stability. Like, this definitely cements that in them. So after the move to Marywood, Jackie starts going to the Holton Arms School in Washington, D.C. And 2 years later, when she's 13 years old, she goes to boarding school. And it is Miss Porter's School in Farmington, Connecticut. I'm fairly certain that that's the same school her mum went to when she was younger. So yeah, she's at school, she's studying her languages, she's doing great. Her half-sister Janet is born in 1945, and then James is born in 1947, which is also the same year that she finishes high school. So not only does she finish high school, but it's also the point where she is launched like a rocket. No, not, well, maybe. As she, like so many other daughters of the wealthy and the aristocracy and the upper class, as a debutante, when they, quote-unquote, come of age, they have a coming-out party where they enter fashionable society. And Jackie's is hosted at the Newport Clambake Club in August of 1947. And it's held there because her stepfather, Uncle Hughie, he's a member. He's a big member. He's an important member. So she has it there. So when she's having this party, her sister shows up, Caroline Lee, and she is in this strapless pink rhinestone gown. And everyone's like, oh my God, she's so gorgeous. But then, when there's another coming out party that another girl is having, Jackie borrows the same dress because she's like, this is just fabulous. Because here's the thing, it's Caroline Lee that is like the trendier of the two sisters. She's actually more fashionable. So Jackie's like, I'm going to borrow that dress. And she does. Thunder stealing aside, Jackie still gets named the debutante of the year. So in autumn of that year, Jackie, she's got all her ducks in a row, and she ends up attending Vassar College up in Poughkeepsie. She did want to go to Sarah Lawrence. That was her first choice because it was closer to New York. But her family thought, just go a wee bit further, a wee bit outside, a wee bit more isolated. But Jackie is absolutely not sold on the location. Like, she doesn't enjoy being in Poughkeepsie. So she doesn't really do a lot of social stuff there, and instead travels into Manhattan on the weekends, where she spends her time in these high society circles. So like, she didn't hate the college, she just hated the location. So when she was there, she was like really involved in like the arts and drama clubs, she wrote for the newspaper, and her studies were going, they were tip top, they were fantastic. But she just didn't like the location. So when she got the opportunity to go to Paris for her junior year, abso-fucking-lutely, she jumped on it. So during 1949 and 1950, she's studying at Université Grenoble-Alpes and the Sorbonne, which she's doing like via like Smith College. And then when she gets back to the States, when she comes home, she ends up transferring to the George Washington University in DC. And in 1951, she graduates with a BA in French literature. In 1951, Jackie and her sister embark on a grand tour, which was back in the day, socialites, especially women, they would go and they would travel around Europe for a wee while. So Jackie is 21, so she is her sister's chaperone. So Jackie is there to basically make sure that her sister doesn't get into any shit. So they're there with these letters from the Auchinclosses, with letters of introduction to like ambassadors and all these people, so that they can make their way through like society in Europe. So they're traveling around this like Hillman Minx, just fucking zooming around Europe. And they get up to hijinks, as sisters are wont to do. And so like at one point they sneak aboard a ship to sort of infiltrate a first class dinner dance. They're just like, whoops, we're here now. I like that they just crashed. They just crashed a gala. And all the while, they're writing letters back to their mum saying, like, we are sewing the buttons on all their clothes. We are wearing gloves. You know, we're doing the proper stuff. Right? Being a part of a royal family might seem enticing, but more often than not, it comes at the expense of everything else, like your freedom, your privacy, and sometimes even your head. Wondery's new podcast, Even the Royals, pulls back the curtain on royal families, past and present, from all over the world, to show you the darker side of what it means to be royalty. From icons like Grace Kelly, Oscar-winning actress turned Princess of Monaco, who the world saw as the ultimate good girl. She mastered playing a happy wife and mother, but beneath it all, she was desperately lonely. Grace spent her whole life working towards perfection, and it ultimately cost her her happiness. Or King Ludwig II from Bavaria. He was only 18 when his father died, leaving the crown to him and a duty to rule that he never wanted. He refused to lead and used the funds from the royal treasury to further his extreme love of opera. But this choice eventually cost him the crown and his life. Follow Even the Royals on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge Even the Royals ad-free right now on Wondery Plus. Obviously. But of course, all good things must come to an end. So in the autumn of 1951, after her summer away in Europe, Jackie gets a job at Vogue magazine as a junior editor, and she's supposed to have the gig for 12 months, like a full year. But when she arrives on her first day, because she's 21, she's already kind of seen like as an old maid. And the editor she tells her that she's too old to be single, and that Vogue is, it's a very female-dominated work environment, and that being there for Jackie wasn't going to be good for her because she wasn't going to find a husband in this environment. Like, it just wasn't going to work for her. So by noon that day, she'd started at 9. By noon, 3 hours later, Jackie quits. She quits Vogue, she takes the advice of the editor and gets the fuck out of Dodge. And she heads back to Washington. Jackie manages to get a new job within a month, and she starts at the Washington Times-Herald. So they hire her as like a part-time receptionist, but she tells them that the work isn't challenging enough for her and wants more to do. So she gets sent up to the city editor, who gives her the job as the inquiring camera girl, which is like a man on the street thing. So she'd go up, take someone's photo, ask them sort of witty questions, and she would kind of try and find people of interest, and it was a pretty good gig for her. It worked really, really well. And so a month after that, in November, she meets a young stockbroker named John Husted. Husted? So then about 2 months later, they announce their engagement in the New York Times. So January 1952, there you go. Hello. But the engagement, it's called off 3 months later by Jackie. She calls it off because he is too immature and boring. And he really wanted her to be a housewife. And she didn't want that. I mean, she wanted to be more than just a housewife. Listen, if you are a housewife, if you have the opportunity to be a housewife, if that's what you want, whether you're AMAB, AFAB, whatever, good for you. Have fun, live your best life. But that is not what she wanted, because society had told women that their job was to be a homemaker and that was all they could be. And she wanted to be more than that. She wanted to have her own achievements, her own goals that didn't revolve around necessarily being, Betty Crocker. And in May of that year, Jacqueline Bouvier is introduced to a dashing young politician by the name of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, by a mutual friend, of course. That's also how Meghan Markle got introduced to, Prince Harry. An introduction by a mutual friend. Damn, I need better friends. So while they're dating, their lives are going pretty well for both of them. So JFK gets elected to the Senate, and Jackie, she ends up being sent to the UK to cover the Queen's coronation. This is the first, televised coronation, and she is a member of the press for it. So Jackie and JFK, they're a really smart match. They're both intelligent, they're both Catholic, they're both really fucking rich and from the same circles. So for them, it's a very smart connection for both of them. So because she is from decent stock, so for him as a political candidate, she's a very decent woman. And for Jackie, there is the financial security of Kennedy money. I mean, there is that 12-year age difference, which is, unpleasant to think about, but it's there. So JFK had actually proposed to Jackie just after the November election, so after he'd won his place in the Senate. And she told him she'd think about it, because she already knew she was going to the UK to cover, the Queen's coronation. And it wasn't until she got back that she accepted his proposal. Imagine being so confident that in the 1950s, you're dating the most eligible bachelor in the country, and you've told him to wait a minute. That is ballsy, and I fucking love it. But she does accept it when she comes back from the UK, and their engagement is announced on the 25th of June, 1953, because I think some people in society still do that now. They do an engagement announcement. But yeah, that was very much what they did back then. And something that may have spurred on her choice to accept the proposal was the fact that her younger sister, got married in April of that year. And it's kind of weird because younger sisters, especially at that time, were definitely not supposed to get married before their older sisters. because it's kind of seen like an insult, like a slap in the face. So it really sort of pushed Jackie into being the sort of like the spinster, the old maid a wee bit, you know? So they get married on the 12th of September 1953, which is like 3 months after their engagement announcement. And I actually have a biddy-sode or an episode about the wedding. I don't know if it's here or if it's on the Patreon, but it goes on the details about like the wedding and the scratches on his face and her fucking dress. Because it is absolutely fucking madness, right? So her dress is designed by Anne Lowe, who is a black couturier, and because of her skin colour, like so many people wrote her out of like the story of the wedding. Like only one person, I don't know if it was Vanity Fair or Vogue, but only one article like published her name. And Anne Lowe, she was consistently making gowns for the elite. So she was making clothes for like the Rockefellers and the Roosevelts and the DuPonts. And she was always like the big name, or not the big name, but the big person who would make these items. Because she would make international like debutante gowns and everything. She was the cream of the fucking crop. But again, because she was African American, people thought they could treat her in a less than respectful manner. So like her and Jackie Kennedy didn't actually get on initially because, well, Jackie wanted a style that was more simple, sleek and French. And for the Kennedys, because it was JFK's dad that really took the reins on the whole wedding thing, was that he wanted this very like detailed, this very kind of, for what Jackie felt was ostentatious, this very big gown. Because like he had invited like press and everybody. It was like the event of the season. It was like the big society wedding. Because they were big families, lots of money, lots of good stock. Mm-hmm. So, and of course the head Kennedy wants her in this fucking gown. So 10 days before the wedding, disaster strikes. This pipe bursts in Anne Lowe's studio and it destroys, it just ruins the original wedding dress, along with 9 out of the 15 bridesmaids' dresses. So a fuck ton of shit is just ruined. So the wedding dress alone had taken 2 months to make, and it had like 50 yards of taffeta, silk taffeta. So like Lowe and her team then had to remake this really intricate gown in 10 days, along with all the bridesmaids' gowns too. Like they had to remake everything. They did it. They absolutely did it. And the crisis was averted. But like the best part of the story for me is that she showed up with the gowns and they were like, go in the back entrance, and Lowe tells them if she is not walking through that front door, then neither are her dresses. Which is just a power move. I fucking love her. So Jackie does wear the now iconic Anne Lowe gown for her wedding. And due to her father's, love of the bottle, it ends up being her stepfather, Uncle Hughie, who gives her away at the wedding. So her and John, they get married at the St. Mary's Church in Newport in Rhode Island. And there's like 1,200 people there. It's fucking massive. So they end up having the ceremony there, and then they go back to Hammersmith Farm, owned by Uncle Hughie, and they have the reception there. And the very next day, the Kennedys leave for their honeymoon, and they go to vacay in Acapulco, going low, go down in Acapulco, in Mexico. That was not the melody of that song. I could not remember it, but we're just going to move on. So when they return from their honeymoon, they move into a house in Hickory Hill in Virginia, which is just in like the suburbs of DC. So they're there. So the first couple of years of their marriage are pretty tough because JFK, he has Addison's disease, and this really just exacerbates this back injury he has. So he ends up going for this surgery, this spinal surgery, which almost kills him. Like, it is fucking atrocious. And it's basically there to make his back pain not as bad. And that was in 1954. The following year, Jackie suffers a miscarriage. And in 1956, their daughter Arabella is stillborn. They end up selling the Hickory Hill house to Robert Kennedy and his wife Ethel because they want a family to have the home. So they end up getting a house in Georgetown and then another one in Boston, an apartment in Boston, sorry. And then in 1957, their rainbow baby, Caroline Kennedy, is born. And when Caroline is born, JFK is actually campaigning. He's trying to get re-elected for the Senate. So Jackie is actually with him because they had been separated here and there throughout, the first 5 years of their marriage. They wanted to try and stay close together, especially considering that, she was in the family way. Jackie just being there becomes this sort of symbol. And it did not go unnoticed that whenever Jackie was with JFK, the crowds were always bigger, sometimes even double the amount than usual. So her in-laws actually said that she was not a natural-born campaigner because she was shy. And I don't think she was shy as such, as that she was keen-eyed. I think she was very observant and she was just taking in the situation. And I think her voice didn't help her because it gave that perception of just sort of more shyness, really. Because she had a pretty wispy voice, very similar to Marilyn Monroe, but probably a little bit more articulate because of just how she was raised. She probably had elocution lessons and shit. So it's kind of like that. But she was very, very astute. So in 1959, when he is visiting how many states? 14 states. Jackie is on the campaign trail with him. And she leaves every now and again to go spend time with their daughter and then joins him again on the campaign trail. And because she knew he was going to start a presidential campaign the following year, she was already fine-tuning his wardrobe. She was just working it and making everything just so. In January 1960, JFK announces that he's running for president. And then it turns out Jackie's pregnant. So for a lot of the campaign trail, she doesn't go with him. It's just not happening. Because she's already had one stillbirth and one miscarriage, she doesn't want to risk it. But what she does do is write this column called Campaign Wife. She's giving interviews, she's answering questions, she's doing all this stuff. She's promoting him from the home turf. And even though she's not really involved physically in the campaign as much as she would like to, because she was there in the very early stages of the pregnancy, but then as it progressed it was very clear that it was high risk, so she used her talents elsewhere. But yeah, even though she's not physically with him for the majority of this campaign, she is constantly in magazines, she's constantly named as best dressed. But on the other side of it, she's being attacked because of, she prefers European designers, especially French. So because she's not wearing American fashions by American designers, along with the fact that how much she spends on her wardrobe gets brought up quite a lot, she just ends up avoiding it altogether. She doesn't discuss her clothes or where she gets them or how much they cost. But she'll talk about her husband's campaign and all the good work he's doing, so on and so forth. In September, there's the first televised presidential debate, and Jackie is watching it at home. Because she's pregnant, she ain't going anywhere. And as she's watching it, she decides that he needs new speechwriters, he needs new aides, he needs to up his game for the October debates. And well, it worked, because on the 8th of November 1960, John F. Kennedy gets elected to the White House. He is now the President of the United States, making Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy the First Lady. A term that she really didn't like because she said it was a horse name. It's what you'd name a horse. And there she goes, horse lady going over the post. You know what, she's not wrong. I can hear it. So JFK is elected, and later that month, Jackie Kennedy gives birth to the couple's first son, John F. Kennedy Jr. And in January 1961, JFK is officially sworn in as the President of the United States. And now Jackie is definitely thrown into like the superstardom of style icon. And she is just constantly being watched with what she's going to wear. She becomes a big influence on fashion and style. But she's actually not the most fashionable person in her family. Her sister Lee, she ends up sneaking gowns into the White House for her sister because she's bringing stuff from like Italy and France and Germany, and the White House just isn't really keen on this. They want her to be like American dressed, but she's like sneaking this shit into her. And Jackie, apart from, dressing fabulously, has to find something to do when she's in the White House. But like a lot of it isn't exactly livable, so she ends up reworking it to be more of a living space. Like she even puts a school in, I think is it the 3rd floor or something? She creates a school for her kids, and like I think there's 10 kids in total. So I'm assuming children of people who work in the White House, probably. So the kids get at least some social interaction. But like she starts this restoration of the White House. So she's finding historical pieces that had been removed, and she's like restoring other areas. And then CBS, they do this documentary. And because of this documentary about her renovating and bringing back the White House to its former glory, because she said anything that was there historically had a purpose. So she was planning on bringing it back. So she wins an honorary Emmy, or she's given an honorary Emmy for this documentary. Although that's like 1962 it comes out, actually. But she's redoing this whole space, and she's trying to make it like a calming environment, because she wants it to be more like a home, because the stress of being president ain't fun, and she wanted him to have like a nice home life. And what she found very difficult was the fact that because she wasn't up to her elbows in flour, and she wasn't a housewife, that she was perceived in like a negative way for quite a bit.
Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
So when she's getting things ready for JFK, like she used to read like the CIA reports and stuff that was coming in. But then it got to the point where she had to stop because she was terrified. She was like, if she had to read any more, like she wouldn't sleep because of all the threats and the possibility of threats and everything dodgy that could be happening. So she just ended up not reading those memos anymore, So in 1962, Jackie goes on this goodwill tour of India and Pakistan, the First Lady's goodwill tour of India and Pakistan, and she brings her sister Lee, who incidentally had at this point married a Polish prince and was now Princess Lee, which, good for her. Good for her. The following year, Jackie's pregnant again. When Jackie was going on European tours and whatnot with her husband, she was wowing dignitaries because, she was fluent in many languages. She was unassuming, but also, witty and intelligent. And when she's doing official tours on her own, like this one, the crowds are massive. Like, you'd think they were waiting for, like, the Queen or the President himself, but they're there for her. Like, she is such a massive, massive draw. But yeah, back on home turf, back in the States, back in the White House, the First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, she basically initiates this bill. Because what was happening is, like, former presidents who were in the White House, when they left, they would just take something they liked with them. And she was like, that's not cool. Everything that's supposed to be in the White House should be in the White House. So she wants to, like, have everything in the White House become property of the Smithsonian Institution and not, like, you can't just take it when you go, mate, So she founds the White House Historical Association, the Committee for the Preservation of the White House. She also makes the position of the curator of the White House Endowment Trust, and the White House Acquisition Trust. And she ends up like sourcing and finding donors for like all of these like historical artifacts for them to be brought back to the White House, you know? And it's not just the White House itself that she really takes hold of and control of. She becomes very in control of how she and her family are presented. So she was very, very particular about when and where her children were going to be like photographed. And she rarely made any sort of public statements. Like, she was very much reserved. In 1963, Jackie announces she's pregnant again. So after the birth of John F. Kennedy Jr., she had to recuperate, I think, for like 2 months. It was a great deal of time for her to get back in sort of decent health. So she's very much being careful this time around. And she goes cockani on most of her, First Lady duties. Meaning she's going to stay home and rest and not join her husband on his European tour again. In a crazy random happenstance, her sister Lee is having a very open affair with Aristotle Onassis, whom the Kennedys fucking despise. Like, Bobby Kennedy hates him, JFK hates him, and they're convinced he's only seeing Lee because he wants to weasel his way into the White House. So when JFK has to go to Europe, it is suggested that Lee accompanies him. His sister-in-law accompanies him on this tour to accompany him to the UK, Italy, Germany and Ireland. Because Jackie, she's 7 months pregnant at this point. And also, they want to get Lee the fuck away from Onassis. And so Lee very dutifully joins her brother-in-law. Unfortunately for them, their little plan didn't work because the moment that tour was over, Lee fucked off back to Onassis. And things are about to get bad to worse for the Kennedy family. On the 7th of August 1963, Patrick Bouvier Kennedy is born 5 weeks early, and his lungs are underdeveloped, and so he is rushed to the Boston Children's Hospital. Jackie is being kept at an airbase because she's had to have a C-section, and JFK goes to the hospital with the baby. Unfortunately, 2 days later, baby Patrick dies. Unsurprisingly, Jackie is grieving and upset, and there are no words to convey the pain that she's feeling. And she does not want to have to go back to Washington. She can't face it. She just doesn't want to have to go through that. And so her sister asks Onassis to invite Jackie onto his fucking $1 million yacht. And JFK literally gets down on one knee and begs Jackie not to go because he's really concerned about how this is going to look, But Jackie needs to get out of there. She has to go. So she goes to the yacht, and for the most part, she's spending time with her sister. Onassis is generally on his, in his wee study, in his wee business nook, doing work, or whatever very rich people do. And Jackie is spending just a lot of time with her sister, recuperating. And after a month away spending time with her sister in Europe, she returns back to the States. In November 1963, the Kennedys are doing a tour of Texas. And on the 22nd of November 1963, Jackie and her husband are in an open-top limo travelling through Elm Street in Dallas, Texas. They're smiling, waving, she's in her pink suit and pillbox hat, and everything just seems to be going like every other campaign, every other tour. JFK and the governor are shot, and Jackie's beautiful pink suit was now splattered with her husband's brains. So JFK is shot at 12:30, and at 1 p.m. he is announced dead. So at 20 to 3 that day, Jackie is aboard Air Force One when Lyndon Johnson is sworn in as president. And she's still in the fucking suit. Instead of removing the blood-stained, brain-splattered pink suit, she thought, fuck this for a game of soldiers. I want them to see what they did. Which is what she called JFK. And she actually regretted washing the blood from her face because she really wanted everyone to see the impact of their actions. So 3 days later, JFK is laid to rest. And Bobby wants there to be an open casket, but Jackie demands a closed one because, his head was blown. Like, there's just bits of skull missing. So she wanted it closed. And she got her way. So Jackie and the kids, they get 2 weeks grace of living in the White House. They get 2 extra weeks and then they're supposed to find somewhere else to live. Because Lyndon B. Johnson and Lady Bird, they have to move in because he's the new president. Remember, Jackie is nothing if not astute. So 1 week after her husband's assassination, she is meeting with a biographer from Vanity Fair magazine. And she cements the idea of the Kennedy administration as Camelot. She's like, there'll never be another Camelot. And she creates this sort of, or initiates at least, the myth. Because again, she's not just a hat rack. So on the 6th of December, Jackie and the kids, they move into a house in Georgetown after declining an offer by President Johnson to be the French ambassador for the White House. And of course, she just wants to get the ball rolling again, so she's getting stuff organised to build a library in honour of JFK. And in January, she does this televised appearance to basically thank the public for, all of their support and all of their well wishes, everything like that. So Jackie ends up buying a house in Georgetown for her and the kids to live in, but it gets so much media attention that she ends up just moving back to New York. So Jackie at this point has undiagnosed PTSD and she's, dealing with a lot of stuff, and she becomes incredibly reliant on her brother-in-law, Robert Kennedy. And Bobby is there for her and his niece and nephew until his own family and, being the Attorney General, really take its toll, and he has to just focus his energy back there. So when Bobby decides to run for president himself, Jackie fully supported him. She was worried something was going to happen to him because she felt there was so much hatred in the world. And he was like, well, maybe, but maybe I can do something good about it. So she's very happy for him, but she's worried. And then her worst fears are realised when he is assassinated at his own party. But after Bobby's death, she slips back into a depression again, and she is getting paranoid because she's worried if, they're killing Kennedys, then her children are next. And that's what she's worried about. So, being the widow of a president, she has certain allowances, she has Secret Service as her security. And she is very much seen as, JFK's widow. And she is expected by the public to stay JFK's widow. She decides she doesn't want to do that. She feels like she has to get out of the country, and so she goes to Europe. But before she buggers off to Europe, she's been dating this architect, and things are going well, except at one point, he realises he cannot keep up with her lifestyle, and so he comes clean, and he's like, Jackie, I'm $650,000 in debt. And she's like, don't worry, we'll work it out. She says with a completely unemotional face. And at that point, she comes to the realisation that this isn't going to work with him because he cannot support her. And so she calls it off and buggers off to Europe. Now what happens is her sister Lee doesn't hear from her. You know who Lee also doesn't hear from? Her boyfriend Aristotle Onassis. So she gets radio silence from these two people. So Jackie and Aristotle Onassis, they get engaged secretly, and Jackie has absolutely zero intention of telling her sister. Who does tell her though is Onassis. He contacts her and he begs her to come to the wedding, for her support. And you know what? Lee actually shows up. she comes to the wedding. That is dysfunctional as fuck. And on the 20th of October 1968, Jackie married Aristotle Onassis on his private Greek island, Skorpios. And after she gets married, she takes the name Jacqueline Onassis, which really upset a lot of people. They were mad she didn't keep just like the Jacqueline Kennedy name. And instead of being called Jacqueline Onassis, for the most part, she was just called Jackie O. In fairness, they were just really, really mad that she was no longer America's widow, right? And because she'd moved on, they wanted her to stay in like this perpetual state of grief, you know? So she trades her legacy effectively as the American widow. So she loses the protection from the US Secret Service, and she also loses her income from the Kennedy Trust. So she ends up with and she basically organizes a dowry for herself. So she negotiates it so that she gets $3 million plus $1 million for each of her children. On top of that, she gets $200,000 per year for her in the event of divorce or his death. So no matter what happened, she was going to be secure. So quite early on in their marriage, things are not going great because he very much wanted to display, his wonderful wife. He trophy wifed her is what he wanted to do. And she would not be displayed. Like, she was there to be safe and to be, looked after. Because he's not happy with things the way things are going, he ends up visiting his former paramour, this opera singer, the very one who he had actually left to start dating, Lee, Jacqueline's sister. And he arrives at her flat, and he strips naked after dinner and refuses to leave, and she basically throws him out the apartment. And she starts shouting at him, "Shame on you, on the anniversary of the death of your second wife's first husband." Like it's the second anniversary of JFK's assassination. Like, of all times to abandon your wife, that does seem like a bad one. You know what I mean? But it's not all bad, because they have some good stuff going on. They have 6 different residencies. So they're in Manhattan and New Jersey and Scorpios and Athens and of course the yacht. Oh, and an apartment in Paris. And with all this newfound wealth, this extra money, she really gets to set up and champion, restoration foundations. So throughout her marriage to Aristotle Onassis, she wants to ensure her children still have a connection to the Kennedys. So they're still visiting Ted and Ted's visiting them, and they're still connected through Uncle Ted. And she also very much used Ted for her public appearances to still connect her with the Kennedys. In 1973, Aristotle's son dies tragically in a plane crash, which absolutely wrecked his father. Aristotle, his health started to decline severely after the death of his son. And in 1975, he passes away from respiratory failure. At the age of 69 in Paris, he's gone. And when he passes away, Greece has some really strict, rules regarding, finances and inheritance from, Greeks to non-Greeks. So it was a very limited amount that Jacqueline could have inherited. And for 2 years, there's legal wrangling going back and forth. And she eventually, after an agreement with Aristotle's daughter, she receives $26 million on the agreement that she waives all rights to every other part of the Onassis estate. And she's like, yeah, that's fine. I'll take my $26 million and go, thanks, bye. But after her second husband's death in 75, she heads back to the States. So she's sort of floating between Manhattan, Martha's Vineyard, the Kennedy compound, and she's just kind of going between these. And she ends up getting a job as an editor at Viking Press. And she's there for about 2 years. The reason that she resigns from Viking Press is because it's assumed that she's involved with approving Jeffrey Archer's book, Shall We Tell the President? which involves like a fictional future with a Kennedy president who's talking about his own attempted assassination, and she wasn't about that, so she just resigned, and she ends up getting a gig with Doubleday as an associate editor. So in 1979, Edward Kennedy, known as Ted, he announces he's running for president, and Jackie is supporting him, and she's involved in the campaign and everything, but it is unsuccessful. Then on the 20th of October 1979, the John F. Kennedy Library and Museum is officially opened. So she had started working on the plans for that, in 1963, and it's 1979, so it took, 16 years to make this happen? And while she's in New York, she is heavily involved in restoration and preservation. So she leads this historic preservation campaign to basically save the Grand Central Terminal from being demolished, and it's all about renovating the structure. She also is involved in these massive protests against skyscrapers at Columbus Circle, which would basically overshadow Central Park. So that gets cancelled. And all the while that she's doing all of her good deeds and fixing things and whatnot and stopping shit being built, she is being harassed by this fucking paparazzi. She has to get a restraining order against him. So this really starts highlighting what paparazzi are and what they're doing. And she kind of focuses a lens on that. But it's not all doom and gloom for Jackie. In 82, she gets a promotion to the senior editor with Doubleday Publishing, and she's there for 12 years. And during this time, her daughter Caroline becomes the president of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. Her mum dies from complications from Alzheimer's. So Caroline becomes the president of the foundation in 87. Jackie's mum dies in 89. And when the 1990s roll around, Jackie actually reaches out to the Clintons in a way that she hadn't actually reached out to any sort of Democratic candidates in a good chunk of time. Because Hillary is asking her advice on how to raise a child in the White House, and Jackie is just constantly giving her tips and information and support. And she's there and she's supporting Bill Clinton when he's campaigning to become president. Then in 1993, but things start going downhill for Jackie in 93 when she's on a fox hunt. That's right, a fox hunt in the 90s. She's on a horse and she gets thrown from a horse. Naturally, doctors want to look over, check her, make sure everything's fine, she's not broken. But as they're examining her, they find a swollen lymph node. So yeah, they discover the swollen lymph node in her groin, and they think it's just part of some infection. But then after this accident, things start deteriorating. 6 months down the line, things are dodgy as fuck. They're finding more lymph nodes. They're finding she's got all these other symptoms from stomach aches and pains and all this shit. And they do more tests and they discover she has non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which is blood cancer for those who don't know. And she ends up having chemotherapy. And she publicly announces that she has cancer. And and she's being very optimistic about it. Her initial prognosis is good, things are going alright. Because she's still working at Doubleday and everything. But then it becomes very clear that the cancer has spread. It's in her spine and it's in her brain. So it gets into her liver, and at that point they're just it's terminal. At this point it's palliative care. So by May of 1994, everything has to be put in place. She knows that she's going to be going soon. And of course, she wants to be home. So on the 18th of May 1994, she is taken home from the Cornell Medical Center at New York Hospital. And on the 19th, at 10:15 p.m., Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis passes away, surrounded by friends and her children. And her funeral takes place at the same church that she was baptised and confirmed in. And then her body is taken to Arlington Cemetery, where she is buried beside her husband and her deceased children. And that is the story of Jackie Kennedy. Or the story of Jackie O, however you want to take it. And wow, I have been recording for several hours. This is going to be a fun edit. It's fine. It's going to be fun. So, if you liked my retelling of this story, apologies for the voice. Unless, of course, you actually like my voice like this. You might prefer it, whom's to say. If you liked it, please rate and review 5 stars. Just give me the 5 stars, and then you can say whatever you want. You can insult me. You can tell me your favourite type of pyjamas. You can mention bananas in a weird and awkward way. Or, you can tell me a whodunit. You can recommend me one that I should watch. Oh, I almost forgot. What did we learn today? Well, we learned that some families are more dysfunctional than others. That it used to be surprisingly easy to nick stuff from the White House. And that marrying up doesn't always make you happy. So, don't forget you can follow me on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. All the links are down below. Now, before I go, because my head feels like it's full of cotton wool, I'm going to do some recommendations. I am going to recommend, actually, Headless by Shipwrecked Comedy on YouTube. It is irreverent, it is literary based, my words are getting fucked up now. What can I say? I like inversions of classic literature. In Shipwrecked Comedy, they have made one of my favourite shows ever, which is Edgar Allan Poe's Murder Mystery Dinner Party / Gala of Her Friends Potluck. It is, chef's kiss. I love it so much. For listening, I am absolutely 100% going to recommend Redacted History. It is eye-opening if you don't already know. Like, I knew some of the stuff that he was talking about, but a good chunk of it, actually, I hadn't heard of, which is awesome because I love having my knowledge gaps filled. And for reading, I am going to suggest The Tuesday Club Murders, because what's life without a little whodunit? And with that, I shall bid you farewell, because I'm so fucking tired. I've been doing this for hours and I'm now in quite a lot of pain. And so, adios, au revoir, my friends. Bye-bye.